The film begins with a benevolent queen giving birth to a daughter during a snowstorm. To honor the day, she and her husband name the child Snow White. Tragically, the queen dies of a sudden illness, leaving the king to raise their daughter alone. He soon remarries, choosing a woman who is secretly an enchantress, obsessed with beauty and power. Shortly after, the king departs on a military campaign and disappears, allowing the new queen to usurp the throne and reveal her true tyrannical nature. Under the evil queen's rule, the kingdom falls into despair. Subjects are either left destitute or conscripted into the royal guard. Snow White, once a cherished princess, is confined to the palace and forced to work as a scullery maid. Despite her circumstances, she remains kind-hearted and resilient. One day, Snow White encounters Jonathan, the leader of a band of rebels, as he raids the palace pantry. When he is captured and sentenced to be tied to the gates, Snow White secretly frees him, showcasing her compassion and bravery. That same day, the magic mirror declares Snow White as the fairest in the land, igniting the queen's jealousy. Fearing that Snow White's beauty will surpass her own, the queen orders the royal huntsman to take Snow White into the forest, kill her, and bring back her heart in a jeweled box. However, the huntsman cannot bring himself to harm Snow White. Instead, he warns her of the queen's intentions and urges her to flee deep into the forest. As Snow White ventures into the forest, she is guided by woodland creatures to a secluded cottage. Exhausted, she falls asleep inside. Later that night, she awakens to find herself confronted by the cottage's owners, 7 magical beings who work in a diamond mine. Moved by her plight, they take pity on her and agree to let her stay. Meanwhile, the queen, upon learning from the magic mirror that Snow White is still alive, imprisons the huntsman and orders a search to find and eliminate Snow White. The next morning, the magical beings are bustling around to prepare breakfast. Grumpy, half awake and already in a bad mood, fumbles his hammer and it clatters one of his friend's head. The friend, assuming it's Sneeze who threw it at him on purpose, hurls a piece of bread at him. This sets off a chain reaction of a food fight. Unfortunately, Dopey, the quietest of the group, finds himself with a bowl tipped over his head, bits of oats dripping down his face. Noticing this, Snow White gently steps outside to find him sitting on the bench, a little disheartened. She sits beside him, and takes a deep breath, whistling a simple, cheerful tune. Dopey looks at her, eyes wide, and she gently encourages him to try the same. He repeats the whistle, slow and clear, and after a few attempts, Dopey manages a small, wavering whistle, his face lighting up as the sound escapes his lips for the first time. Snow White is happy for him, and Dopey beams, his confidence visibly growing. Feeling uplifted, Dopey walks back inside the cottage beside Snow White, still practicing his newfound whistle. As they enter, the other magical beings freeze, their argument forgotten as they stare at Dopey, who proudly whistles again, the sound echoing off the wooden beams of the cottage. The room falls silent for a moment, before bursting into laughter and cheers, everyone thrilled by their usually silent friend's breakthrough. Snow White, seeing this moment of unity, seizes the opportunity and suggests that they work together to clean up the cottage, which has become a chaotic mess. She assigns each of them a task, giving them structure and a sense of purpose they clearly haven't had in a long time. Later, as the magical beings set about scrubbing the floors, polishing the furniture, and dusting the corners, Snow White takes a moment to think about the larger dangers that still loom. She realizes that despite the warm welcome, she isn't truly safe here as long as the queen seeks her death. She pulls the magical beings and explains her fears. She tells them that her father might still be alive, hidden or imprisoned by the queen, who has lied about so many things. She pleads with them to help her search for him, but just as they begin to consider her request, the magical beings notice the time and hurriedly rush off to their work in the diamond mines, promising to think it over. As they leave, Dopey lingers for a moment, turning back to Snow White. He clumsily but sincerely thanks her for her kindness, his whistle now a little more confident. Snow White gives him an encouraging nod, and he hurries off after his friends, his small steps full of new confidence. Not willing to wait, Snow White heads out on her own, determined to find her father. She navigates the thick forest, her mind racing with memories of her father and the hope that he might still be alive. Suddenly, she's yanked behind the tree by Jonathan, the rebellious leader she freed days ago, crouched beside her, his finger to his lips as the sound of clinking armor and heavy footsteps approach. Together, they peer through the branches as 2 of the queen's soldiers ride past, their eyes scanning the forest floor for any sign of her. Once the soldiers are out of earshot, Snow White whispers her plea to Jonathan, asking him to help her find her father. Jonathan hesitates for a moment before nodding, agreeing to stand by her side. Suddenly, the rest of Jonathan's crew appears from behind the trees, weapons drawn, ready to defend their leader. Jonathan quickly explains the situation, and without hesitation, his crew agrees to help. Before they can plan their next move, the sound of snapping branches and rustling leaves signals the approach of another group of soldiers. Jonathan draws his sword, urging Snow White to run, but she refuses, unwilling to let more people risk their lives for her. As the soldiers close in, she boldly steps out into the open, drawing their attention away from Jonathan and his crew. She darts through the underbrush, the soldiers in hot pursuit, branches snapping around her as arrows whistle past her head. She manages to lose them in the dense thicket and circles back, finding Jonathan and his crew hiding. Before they can catch their breath, a sudden, sharp whistle echoes through the trees. One of the soldiers levels a crossbow at her, the bolt aimed squarely to her back. Without hesitation, Jonathan throws himself behind Snow White, the arrow sinking deep into his chest. Later, Snow White brings Jonathan to the cottage, and pleads with Doc to save him. Doc, startled by what's happening, agrees. Moments later, Doc emerges and tells Snow White that Jonathan will survive. His wound has been cleaned and stitched. Everyone decides to celebrate as Jonathan has survived the attack. Snow White watches them all, her heart swelling with a deep sense of gratitude and affection. She glances at Jonathan, and realizes that she might be falling in love with him. Suddenly, the sharp crack of a distant branch echoes through the trees, followed by the unmistakable sound of metal clinking against metal. The group realizes that the Queen's soldiers are nearby, and Jonathan tells Snow White that he and his men will lead the soldiers away, giving her and the magical beings a chance to escape if needed. Snow White pleads with him to stay, to let them fight together, but Jonathan gently promises to return for her in 2 days, and rushes through the forest with his crew. Later, Jonathan is captured and dragged before the throne. The Queen demands to know where Snow White is, but Jonathan refuses to say. The Queen's eyes narrow, her patience thinning as she notices Snow White's delicate necklace clutched around Jonathan's neck. Without hesitation, she reaches down and rips it off. The Queen retreats to her private chamber, where she mixes a potion. She whispers dark incantations under her breath, her voice growing louder as the mixture bubbles and hisses in its glass vial. She drinks the concoction in a single gulp and turns into an old wrinkled lady. Her plan is to poison Snow White by offering her an apple that will potentially kill her. Elsewhere in the forest, the magical beings gather around Snow White, offering to join her in her quest to find her father, their loyalty to her clear in their eager eyes, but Snow White gently refuses. She thanks them for their courage but insists that she cannot risk their lives any further, her heart too heavy with the loss of Jonathan to bear the thought of more of her friends falling in battle. Meanwhile, the Queen, now fully disguised, sets off into the forest, her vulture soaring above her, its sharp eyes scanning the trees for any sign of her prey. She approaches the small cottage and knocks on the door. Snow White, unsuspecting and with her heart still aching for Jonathan, opens the door to find the frail, hunched figure on her doorstep. The Queen, her voice now a raspy, offers Snow White the cursed apple, her gnarled fingers extending the bright, gleaming fruit with an encouraging nod. Snow White hesitates, but the Queen's soothing words and convincing tone eventually persuade her. Snow White takes the apple, her delicate fingers brushing against the Queen's cold hand. As she brings it to her lips and takes a small, trusting bite, her eyes widen in sudden shock. The sweet taste quickly turns bitter, and her knees buckle as a cold numbness spreads through her body. She stumbles back, her vision blurring as the Queen straightens, her twisted smile revealing her true nature. The Queen reveals her true identity and tells Snow White that her father's kindness made him weak, and that it was this very weakness that allowed her to take his life without resistance. Snow White's eyes fill with tears as the truth of her father's fate strikes her heart like a dagger. She collapses to the ground, her last breath escaping her lips as her body goes limp. Nearby, the woodland animals sense the danger and rush to the magical beings at work, frantically chirping and tugging at their sleeves. Realizing something is terribly wrong, they drop their tools and rush back to the cottage, only to find Snow White lying motionless on the ground. They surround her, their small faces wet with tears as they mourn their beloved friend. Back at the dungeon, Jonathan and the huntsman, their spirits unbroken, manage to break free from their chains. The huntsman urges Jonathan to go to Snow White, insisting that he will hold off the guards to buy him time. Jonathan races through the winding forest, his heart pounding with a desperate hope. Reaching the edge of the forest, Jonathan stumbles upon the magical beings, their faces twisted in grief as they surround Snow White's still form. His heart shatters at the sight, his knees giving out as he collapses beside her. Gently, he takes her cold hand in his, and leans down to press a final, tearful kiss to her lips, whispering a broken goodbye. Suddenly, Snow White's chest rises as a sharp, desperate breath fills her lungs, her eyes fluttering open as if waking from a deep, enchanted sleep. The magical beings gasp in shock, their tears turning to cries of joy as they watch Snow White slowly sit up, her eyes locking with Jonathan's in a moment of pure unspoken love. Snow White gets up and tells them that the queen not only took her father's life but has now tried to take hers as well. Her heart hardens with a newfound resolve as she vows to reclaim her kingdom and restore it to the glory it once held. Dopey, his courage inspired by her unbreakable spirit, steps forward and for the first time, speaks, his voice small but filled with determination, pledging to stand by her side. Later, as Snow White approaches the kingdom, she steps onto the cobbled road leading to the castle gates. Townspeople notice her, their eyes widening in surprise. Some move closer, recognizing their princess, their expressions shifting from disbelief to hope. Snow White walks among them, offering reassuring nods, her presence enough to stir courage in their hearts. The queen orders her guards to kill Snow White, but their hands grip their weapons with hesitation. They look at Snow White, the light of hope reflected in their eyes, and lower their swords. Fury twists the queen's face as she watches her soldiers falter. She storms back to her chamber, her footsteps echoing off the cold stone walls. She calls for the magic mirror, demanding to know who now holds the title of the fairest. The mirror's surface trembles before it cracks, splintering into 1,000 shards that swirl around her, drawing her in. She reaches out, but the glass pulls her into its fractured depths, her screams fading as the shards seal behind her, trapping her in a void of darkness. Back in the courtyard, Snow White reaches one of the rooms, and outside the townspeople cheer for her. A few weeks later, the kingdom breathes under a new rule, its people once more smiling, as Snow White leads them into a brighter future. Make sure to like, comment and subscribe for more notifications. Until next time. See you soon.